I'm Derek Wiley. I'm a fisheries research biologist with Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Tuesday I'll be showing 2 films that I put together over the last 6 months. They weren't films that were assigned to me by the agency. They just kind of came about in unique ways. The first of which is called Journey's End, and that's an 18-minute video. It's set to music, and it just captures underwater behavior and spawning of chum salmon, Chinook salmon, coho salmon, and Pacific lamprey. And one of the cool things I think about that video is all that footage is captured right here. So it's right on the North Coast, right in our backyards. And, you know, I'm fortunate because I'm an avid fly fisherman, work for the agency, so I spend a lot of my time on the water. Sure. I get to see those things every day. But even people, I think a lot of people that live here, it's right in their backyard, but just because of not being out there, they don't see as much of that. In 2011, I purchased a GoPro camera to kind of capture some fly fishing trips that I was doing at that time, and I've just kind of taken that camera out a lot of times on the water with specific intents of I want to capture, you know, underwater spawning fish or juvenile fish, but with no specific purpose of where I was going to show that. And then I found out in December that the Oregon chapter of the American Fisheries Society, very large research organization, the Oregon chapter, which is a big chapter, they were going to have a meeting in Seaside, their annual meeting in March, and they were going to have an underwater fish video/picture session. So I thought, here's the venue to show this.
Perfect.
So I had some older clips. I went out in December and early January, got a bunch more clips, did some video editing, and set it to music, and it became Journey's End. So that'll be the first video I'll show, and it's not a documentary. There's no data, no storyline. It's just to show people a glimpse into the fish's world. Giving people even more appreciation for the fish, how amazing life cycles are for the various species, and then hopefully raising a conservation ethic that, you know, these fish are out there, but there's a lot of human impacts that can affect how well they're going to survive and how well our populations are doing. So to kind of bring that exposure to people.
Derek, I mean, I like to think that in Oregon we pay attention. Do you think we're paying attention better than we used to?
I think there's a growing conservation ethic that's kind of taken hold. I think we've learned from maybe some past mistakes, and we're getting better at trying to correct some of those problems. But you also hear enough about climate change and ocean acidification and just humans. You know,
I think we're finally waking up, and when we have, like, I'm trying to think, Weigert, the Whiskey Creek Fish Hatchery, and not the fish hatchery, the shellfish hatchery, and talking about the ocean acidification and things that, and now people, I swear, man, I was going to say 10, maybe 5 years ago, no, global warming. And now we're finally saying, I guess maybe there was something to that.
I know.
We're getting to the point where denial isn't an option.
So. Right. I think, you know, we need to act and realize that, you know, we still have to survive and we have needs, but we have to balance that with what the wildlife and the fish need as well. And I think we're trying to do that, but I still think we have a ways to go.
I agree. Now, there's going to be another film also?
There's going to be another film. It's called Salmonid Life Cycle Monitoring in the North Fork Nehalem River in 2015, and that's actually a documentary. It's narrated. It's about 30 minutes long, and the Salmonid Life Cycle Monitoring project, which I've been a part of since 2006, that's been ongoing since 1998 on the North Fork Nehalem, and the goals are to make population estimates of returning adult salmonids, so coho, chinook, winter steelhead, and then also make population estimates of outmigrating juvenile salmonids, and then to make freshwater and marine survival estimates for coho. So the project's been ongoing since 1998, but I had a chance to attend the National American Fisheries Society meeting in Portland last year, and they had a session. Most of those meetings, it was a big meeting, 3,000 people. Most of those meetings, they're conventional presentations, PowerPoint, slides, graphs. It was really cool because they had a session devoted entirely to documentaries. And I'm already interested in videography and documentaries, and I found that session to be really powerful. So after the meeting was over in August, I thought, you know, I have to do a documentary of our Salmonid Life Cycle Monitoring project because I feel like there's a lot of unique aspects to that project and the challenges we face, the weather that we have to deal with, chasing the fish. So that kind of spurred the making of that documentary. So I went out this year, had a bunch of footage. My crew got pictures and footage. And I kind of wrote a documentary to capture what it is to be on the project, what we do, the challenges we face, how well the fish are doing on the North Fork Nehalem, and kind of tied that in with, some of the issues with our ocean in the last couple of years, with it being warmer than average and not as productive for our fish. And I think it was a really good year to do a documentary because it was an interesting year. We had high water or low water at the beginning of the season. Very high water. Our coho didn't really do that well. We didn't have a big run of coho. Yeah. Chinook did well. And there was just a lot of interesting storylines that came about.
Well, I hear that, I think of Tim Josie, one of our county commissioners. You probably know who Tim is, Doug. And they talk about the coho and how can this be an endangered fish if we can take the fish, right. And I know that conversation, because Tim brings it up almost every time. He's either going to talk about that or timber. But are we doing better?
It's been really interesting the last 4 or 5 years. I'll just focus on that period. Okay. On the North Fork Nehalem, we've been monitoring since 1998, but over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen some of the largest returns of wild coho that we've seen since '98. I always like to make sure people don't say, "Oh, we had record runs," because if we look historically, it's not fair to look historically because we had a lot of fish. If you just look in the short term of '98 through now, since we've been monitoring, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 2 of our biggest runs of wild coho, but we've also had one of our actual lowest run of wild coho on the North Fork, and then this past year was one of the lowest. So we've seen really good, and we've seen very poor over the past 4 or 5 years. If you're going off of 2014, it was a great year. There were a lot of coho, and they were everywhere. And
don't get to just use the statistics that you want.
Right. But 2015, it was not very good, and with the ocean the way it is, it's very unlikely that we will have a good run this year. It doesn't look too promising for coho in this coming year, just the way the ocean was.
Interesting.
And that's the importance of monitoring every year. If you're monitoring 5 years and you get a really good conditions, you're going to conclude one thing. If you monitor 5 bad years, you conclude another. So if you do a long-term monitoring project, you get to see the variation.
Years ago, my Jim, he's gone from us now. He passed in 2000, but there was a displaced timber worker program. And I want to say it was in '96, and he ended up cruising timber for BLM, but they also did some stream surveys too, and it was pretty interesting. And here you take a timber faller, and he completely changed the way he looked at not only how we harvest timber, but our streams, etc. So this kind of information is so wonderful to have in front of people, and I think you're right. Being able to see them, the film of the actual habitat and that from someone that's out there makes a difference. You can put all the scientific jargon you want, and someone's going to go.
Well, and that's very important. That will never go away. But I think hopefully allowing somebody to feel it. Like I mentioned, those documentaries for me, they're powerful. They reach you in a way that a bunch of slides can't, because you don't see behind the scenes. The fish and all the aspects of a project. So that's where I hope this comes across. And I did presentations in Manzanita for the Lower Nehalem Watershed Council, and this Tuesday I presented for the Nestucca Nesquin Watershed Council, and both were really successful events, and a lot of people showed up, and I had a lot of great questions. So it was good to know that I had an engaged audience that was very interested and wanted to know more.
Absolutely. Now, and this is going to be Life in the River, and Derek, this is this coming Tuesday.
This coming Tuesday, May 31st, 6:30 p.m., Tillamook County Library.